The rain in Seoul didn't simply fall. It punished. Cold sheets of water lashed the cemetery like a relentless storm determined to erase every memory carved into the earth. Wind twisted through the black iron gates, rattling them like the bones of the forgotten. Naira Coleman knelt in the mud. Her black dress clung to her skin, soaked and heavy, the fabric dark against her deep brown complexion. Her fingers trembled as they traced the engraved letters on the marble headstone before her. Daniel Coleman, beloved husband. 6 feet below the earth lay the only man who had ever truly seen her, and now he was gone. At just 24 years old, Naira was a widow. Her breath came out in shaky clouds as tears mixed with the rain running down her cheeks. "I miss you," she whispered. The words dissolved into the storm. A year. It had been exactly 1 year since the plane crash that stole Daniel from the sky. 1 year since the world she knew collapsed into silence. And yet the pain still felt as raw as the day she received the call. Her fingers pressed against the stone. "Daniel, they're trying to take everything." The wind howled louder, as if the sky itself mourned with her. Then, "Get up, Naira." The sharp voice sliced through the rain, like broken glass. Naira stiffened. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Marcus Coleman, her father-in-law. "You're getting mud all over your morning dress," Marcus said with disgust. "And frankly, it's embarrassing." Slowly, Naira lifted her gaze. Marcus stood behind her beneath a silk umbrella held by a bodyguard. His gray suit looked untouched by the rain, his expensive Italian shoes planted carefully on the cemetery path. Beside him stood Derek Coleman, Daniel's younger brother. Derek checked his gold watch with a bored smirk. "Still crying?" Derek scoffed. "He's been dead a year." The cruelty in his tone hit harder than the rain. Naira pushed herself to her feet, her knees shaking. "He was my husband." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "And my son." His voice carried no grief, only irritation. "But grief has a time limit, Naira, and yours expired months ago." Derek chuckled. "And since you couldn't even give him an heir," he added casually, "you've overstayed your welcome." The word struck like a slap. Naira's chest tightened. The Coleman estate, the penthouse, Daniel's companies. Everything had once been theirs together, but since his death, the family had slowly begun tearing her life apart piece by piece. "The companies belonged to the Coleman family," Marcus continued coldly. "The cars, the accounts, the assets, all of it." He stepped closer. "You are officially a guest in your own home." The rain intensified. "And your reservation," Derek said with a grin, "just expired." Naira felt the ground tilt beneath her. "Daniel promised I would always be taken care of." Marcus leaned down, his eyes cold. "Daniel is a ghost." The sentence landed like a coffin lid closing. Then Marcus straightened his tie. "But I have a proposition." Naira frowned. "A business partner of mine requires assistance." Derek smirked knowingly. "A wife," Marcus clarified. The word felt wrong. "His name is Park Hyansuk." Even in the storm, the name carried weight. The Park family. In Seoul's elite circles, their name was spoken in whispers. Not businessmen, not politicians. Something darker, the rulers of the city's shadows. The head of the Park Syndicate. Marcus continued calmly. "But unfortunately, he recently suffered an accident." Derek pretended to sigh. "Poor guy." Marcus's lips curled slightly. "Paralyzed from the waist down." Naira's stomach twisted. "He lives in isolation in his estate. His board of directors needs stability." Marcus's eyes hardened. "They need him to appear domesticated." Naira slowly understood. "You want me to marry him?" Marcus nodded. "A caretaker wife." The wind roared through the cemetery. "A nurse who keeps the image of a happy household." Derek shrugged. "He can't exactly chase women anymore." Naira stepped back in horror. "You're selling me." Marcus didn't even flinch. "I am giving you a life." He pulled a folder from inside his coat. Inside was a contract. "Marry Park Hyansuk." The paper fluttered in the rain. "And you may keep the penthouse." Naira stared at him. "If I refuse?" Marcus calmly pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen. A live security feed appeared. The front door of the Coleman penthouse. 2 locksmiths already stood there with electronic tools. Marcus smiled. "Then by midnight, you'll be homeless." The storm thundered overhead. No bank accounts. No house. No phone. Derek leaned closer. You'll be sleeping on these graves. Naira's throat tightened. They had already taken everything. Daniel's companies. Her inheritance. Her dignity. Now they wanted to sell her. Her heart pounded. The rain soaked through her dress as she looked back at Daniel's headstone. I'm sorry, she whispered silently. Then she looked back at Marcus, at Derek, at the greedy eyes that had turned her grief into a business deal. Something inside her hardened. Fine. Marcus smiled. I knew you were sensible. Naira grabbed the pen. Her hand shook as she signed the contract. Naira Coleman. Marcus took the paper with satisfaction. Congratulations. Derek laughed. You're marrying a crippled crime lord. Marcus closed the folder. Your car will arrive tonight. The two men walked away from the grave, without looking back, leaving Naira alone in the rain. But neither of them noticed something. At the cemetery gate, a black sedan sat silently. Inside the car, a man watched through a long-range camera lens. Dark eyes. Cold. Observant. He had seen everything. Park Hyun-suk slowly lowered the lens. The tattooed fingers of his right hand tapped lightly against the door. So this is her. His bodyguard glanced at him. You still intend to continue the test, boss? Hyun-suk's lips curved faintly. Yes. Outside, Naira stood in the rain. Broken. Alone. But she didn't know the truth. The man she had just agreed to marry was not paralyzed. Not weak. Not broken. For months, the shadow dragon of soul had pretended to be crippled. Watching. Waiting, searching for one thing, someone who would remain loyal when the dragon appeared powerless. And tonight, the Colemans believed they had thrown away a nuisance. But instead, they had just delivered a queen to her king. And soon, the dragon would stand and burn their world to the ground. The journey to the Park estate felt like crossing into another world. The black sedan moved silently through the rain-soaked streets of Seoul, its tinted windows separating Naira from the glowing chaos of the city outside. Neon lights flickered across the glass, like distant stars. But Naira barely noticed them. Her hands rested tightly in her lap, fingers interlocked so hard her knuckles had turned pale. Everything had happened too quickly. Daniel's grave, Marcus's ultimatum, the contract, the marriage. She looked down at the ring on her finger. It was cold, heavy, unfamiliar. Across from her sat two men in identical charcoal suits. They hadn't spoken a single word since she entered the car. Their silence felt less like politeness and more like surveillance. After nearly 40 minutes, the car slowed. The bright skyline of Seoul had vanished behind them. Now towering stone walls surrounded the road. Rain slid down the massive iron gates ahead like black tears. The driver pressed a button. The gates opened. The Park estate appeared through the mist. It didn't look like a mansion. It looked like a fortress. Dark stone towers rose behind thick walls lined with security cameras and armed guards. Lights glowed faintly behind enormous windows, but the place felt cold and distant, like a palace carved from shadow. The car stopped beneath a massive covered entrance. One of the guards opened the door. We have arrived, Mrs. Park. The words felt strange. Mrs. Park. Naira stepped out. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air was icy. She wrapped her arms around herself and looked up at the towering mansion. Somewhere inside those walls lived the man she had just married, the shadow dragon of Seoul. Park Hyun-suk. The wedding. The ceremony had taken place earlier that morning. If it could even be called a ceremony, it had felt more like a transaction. The mansion's grand foyer was enormous, paved with black marble that reflected the dim glow of a chandelier above. Everything echoed. Every step. Every breath. Every heartbeat. Marcus and Gloria Coleman stood near the back wall like smug spectators at an auction. Derek leaned casually against a pillar, scrolling through his phone. Then the doors opened. The sound came first. Rubber wheels rolling across marble. The guards entered, and between them, a wheelchair. Park Hyun-suk. Naira had expected someone frail, broken, weak. Instead, she saw a man who radiated power even while seated. His shoulders were broad beneath a midnight blue suit tailored perfectly to his body. His dark hair was neatly styled, his jaw sharp and masculine, but it was his eyes that froze her. Cold, deep, watching everything. And his hands, they rested on the armrests of the chair, tattooed with intricate black ink. that curled across his knuckles and wrists like living dragons. The room fell silent. Marcus stepped forward with fake politeness. "The bride is ready." Hyun-suk didn't look at him. He looked only at Naira. The intensity of that gaze made her heart race. It felt as if he could see through every layer of her grief. Every scar the past year had left on her soul. The official cleared his throat. "Please sign the registry." Naira walked to the table. Her legs felt heavy. As she reached for the pen, her fingers brushed the armrest of the wheelchair. For a moment, something strange passed through her. A spark of warmth. A quiet energy. But when she glanced at him, his expression hadn't changed. He looked like stone. She signed. Naira Coleman Park. The hyphen felt like a chain. Gloria leaned close and hugged her with fake affection. "Don't embarrass us," she whispered in Naira's ear. "If he sends you back, the street will be waiting." Derek chuckled. Then the Coleman family left. Their laughter echoed through the hall as the doors slammed shut behind them. And just like that, Naira was alone. Alone with her new husband. She looked down at him nervously. "Mr. Park." No response. His dark eyes remained fixed on her. Watching. Measuring. Finally, his bodyguard spoke. "The boss is tired. You will follow us." The silent weeks. Life inside the Park mansion became strangely quiet. Days blended together. Naira woke each morning before sunrise. She prepared tea, organized medications, checked medical reports. Everything about her new life revolved around caring for a man who rarely spoke. Hyun-suk spent most of his time in his study overlooking the mountains. He would sit near the large window in his wheelchair, staring out into the mist, sometimes for hours, without moving, without speaking. At first Naira was terrified of him, but slowly, something changed. She began noticing small things. The way he preferred his coffee, the specific books he kept within reach, the way his fingers twitched slightly when she mentioned certain subjects. One rainy afternoon, she began talking just to break the silence. Daniel used to hate rain. Her voice echoed softly through the study. He was a pilot. She smiled faintly at the memory. He said flying through clouds felt like crashing into walls. Hyun-suk didn't respond, but his eyes shifted slightly toward her reflection in the window. Encouraged, she continued, "I used to want to be an architect." She ran a cloth across a shelf of books. "I wanted to build things that lasted longer than people." Still silence, but something in the room had changed. The air felt warmer. Over the following days, she talked more. About her childhood. About Daniel. About her dreams. About how the Colemans had treated her like she was worthless because she hadn't given them a grandchild. "They thought I was empty," she whispered one evening. "But I loved him." Her voice trembled slightly. "I just wanted to be seen as a person." For the first time, Hyun-suk's jaw tightened. She didn't notice, but inside him something shifted. For years he had lived surrounded by lies. People feared him, used him, betrayed him. But this woman, this widow sold into marriage, spoke to him with pure honesty. She treated him like a human being, not a monster, not a crime lord, just a man. And it was more dangerous to his heart than any weapon. The kindness. Weeks passed. Naira continued caring for him, but she did more than her duties. She brought small comforts, flowers from the garden, books she thought he might enjoy. One evening, she placed a small cup of street vendor coffee on his desk. "I noticed you prefer bitter coffee." She smiled shyly. "This is from Myeongdong Market." Still no reply, but his fingers tightened slightly around the armrest. At night, she would sometimes sit beside him and read poetry aloud. Her voice filled the quiet mansion like soft music, and every word reached him, every confession, every dream, every lonely whisper. One night, as she stood at the door, she said softly, "Good night, Hyun-suk." The door closed. The room fell silent again, but inside the wheelchair, the shadow dragon exhaled slowly. The test was over. He had found what he was looking for, and it terrified him, because he hadn't planned to fall in love. The birthday. Naira woke before dawn on her 25th birthday. The room was dark, quiet, lonely. Last year, Daniel had surprised her with breakfast in bed and burnt toast. Now the memory hurt too much to hold. She sat up slowly. Another ordinary day, or so she thought. As she walked toward the door, it opened. Naira froze. In the hallway sat Hyun-suk in his wheelchair. Alone. No guards. No bodyguards. Just him. The dim light framed his sharp features like a statue carved from obsidian. Hyun-suk. Her voice trembled. Are you in pain? She hurried toward him and knelt beside the chair. But something about his eyes felt different today. Alive. Focused. Then, he spoke. Happy birthday, Naira. The voice was deep. Powerful. Like distant thunder. Naira gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. You can speak. Hyun-suk's lips curved slightly. The Colemans only see what they want to see. His voice filled the hallway with quiet authority. They believed I was broken. Her mind raced. They told me you were paralyzed. They told you many things. He moved the wheelchair closer. They never realized I was listening. Every word she had whispered, every confession, he had heard it all. Naira felt her cheeks burn. Why tell me now? Hyun-suk looked at her. His expression softened slightly. Because today is your day. He gestured toward the room. I have a gift for you. She hesitated. What kind of gift? His eyes glinted. Trust me. Then he gave a quiet command. Turn around. Naira slowly turned her back to him. Her heart pounded. Close your eyes. She obeyed. The room fell silent. Her breath grew shallow. The scent of sandalwood filled the air behind her. Then, she heard something impossible. Footsteps. Behind her. Her heart skipped. But Hyun-suk was in the wheelchair. Wasn't he? His voice whispered close behind her. Wait for it, Naira. The warmth of a body moved near her back. The air changed. Something was happening. Something that would shatter everything she believed. And the moment she turned around, her world would never be the same again. The silence behind Naira felt heavier with every second. Her eyes were closed just as Hyun-suk had instructed, but her mind raced wildly. She could hear him breathing behind her. But something was wrong. The sound wasn't coming from the wheelchair. It was closer. Much closer. Then, a warm presence stepped right behind her. Before she could react, strong arms wrapped around her waist. Naira gasped. Her body froze instantly. The embrace was firm and powerful, pulling her backward against a chest that felt solid as stone. Her heart exploded into panic. The man holding her was tall, far taller than the seated figure she had been carrying for all these weeks. A deep voice murmured near her ear. Hush. The voice vibrated through her spine like thunder. It was unmistakable. Hyun-suk. But he wasn't supposed to be standing. Her eyes flew open as she twisted around in shock, and what she saw nearly stole the air from her lungs. Park Hyun-suk stood before her, not in a wheelchair, not broken, not helpless. He stood tall and powerful, at least 6 feet in height, his broad shoulders filling the room like a wall of living steel. His posture was straight, commanding, like a king who had finally stepped out of hiding. Naira stumbled backward. You're standing, she whispered. Tears immediately filled her eyes. How is this possible? Her mind replayed every memory from the past weeks, helping him into bed, bathing his hands, speaking to him as if he couldn't hear her. The humiliation, the vulnerability. You lied to me, she said softly, pain creeping into her voice. Hyun-suk stepped forward slowly. His movements were smooth, controlled, powerful. There was nothing fragile about him, nothing broken. His tattooed hand gently lifted to cup her cheek. The accident was real, he said quietly. His voice carried none of the cold cruelty the world feared, but it held authority. And the scars on my body are real. His thumb brushed away a tear from her face. But the paralysis. He exhaled slowly. That was my choice. Naira stared at him. Why? Hyun-suk looked down at her with a mixture of honesty and regret. In my world, power attracts enemies. He moved closer until their foreheads nearly touched, and weakness reveals truth. His dark eyes burned with emotion. I needed to know who would remain loyal when the dragon appeared powerless. Her breath trembled. So, I was a test. The words hurt her more than she expected. For a moment Hyun-suk didn't answer. Then he spoke softly. At first. His hand slid gently to the back of her neck. But not anymore. Naira looked up into his eyes. You heard everything, didn't you? Yes. My stories. Yes. My grief. Yes. My loneliness. He nodded. I heard every word. Her cheeks burned red with embarrassment. I thought you were unconscious half the time. His lips curved slightly. I was never asleep. Naira let out a shaky laugh mixed with tears. So you watched me talk like a fool for weeks? His expression softened. No. He leaned closer. I watched the strongest woman I have ever met refuse to become cruel, even after the world broke her. His voice dropped lower. You treated a monster like a human being. Naira shook her head slowly. You're not a monster. The words slipped out before she could stop them. For a brief moment, the powerful crime lord looked almost surprised. Then something in his eyes changed. Warmth. Possession. I have done terrible things in my life, he said quietly. But I will never let the world do terrible things to you again. He pulled her into his arms again, but this time gently. You are my wife. His voice was firm. And from today forward, you are the queen of my empire. Naira's heart raced. The world she thought she understood had completely changed. But before she could respond, a phone began vibrating on the desk. Hyun-suk glanced at it. The caller ID made his expression darken instantly. He answered. What? The voice on the other side spoke rapidly. Hyun-suk's eyes turned cold. I understand. He hung up slowly. Naira immediately sensed the tension. What happened? He looked at her. The Colemans. Her stomach twisted. What did they do now? They just called my office. His voice dropped dangerously low. They're demanding $10 million. What? They claim they deserve a family tax for arranging our marriage. Naira felt anger burn inside her chest. They sold me like property. And now they want money for it. Hyun-suk's jaw tightened. They think I'm still the cripple in the wheelchair. He walked toward the window. They have no idea who they're dealing with. 2 days later, Naira decided she needed air. Despite Hyun-suk's protests, she insisted on driving into the city for a short trip. I just want to buy something for the charity auction, she promised him. I won't be long. Reluctantly, he allowed it, but he also quietly activated the security tracker in her Rolls-Royce. The black luxury car glided through Seoul traffic like a shadow. But Naira didn't notice the gray van following her from a distance. By the time she finished her shopping and entered the underground parking garage, the van had already arrived. The air in the garage felt heavy, too quiet. As she reached her car, a hand slammed against the door. Don't scream. 3 men surrounded her. One of them held a knife. Hand over the keys. Her heart dropped. You're working for the Colemans. The thug smirked. Smart girl. They forced her to give them her phone, her handbag, the car keys. But before leaving, one of them grabbed the diamond necklace Hyun-suk had given her that morning and ripped it off her neck. Marcus says this is just the beginning. They shoved her hard against a pillar. Then they drove away in her car, leaving her alone, bruised, shivering, standing in the rain once again. But this time, she wasn't the helpless widow from the cemetery. Back at the Park Estate, alarms began flashing across the security monitors. The GPS signal from Naira's car disappeared. Her emergency tracker activated. Inside the command room, Park Hyun-suk stood up from his chair. The room instantly fell silent. The dragon had awakened. Find her. His voice thundered through the room. If a single hair on her head is harmed, his eyes turned dark with fury. I will bury every man responsible. Within minutes, the park syndicate mobilized. Black SUVs flooded the city. Traffic cameras were hacked. Every street within a 3-mile radius was monitored. Exactly 6 minutes later, a convoy of vehicles screeched to a stop beside Naira. Doors flew open. Armed men stepped out. And then, Hyun-suk himself stepped out of the lead car. He ignored the umbrella offered by his bodyguard. The rain soaked his suit as he walked toward her. When he reached her, he didn't speak. He simply pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against his chest. His coat wrapped around her shoulders. I have you, he whispered. His voice was filled with a quiet rage that made even his own men step back. The world will pay for this night. His eyes turned toward the city skyline. And the Colemans. His jaw tightened. They just declared war. The storm that night over Seoul felt almost unnatural. Wind howled across the Han River, pushing waves of rain against the dark warehouses that lined the industrial docks. Inside one of those abandoned shipping warehouses, 3 people sat tied to metal chairs. Marcus Coleman, Gloria Coleman, Derek Coleman. Their expensive clothes were soaked with sweat and grime, their faces pale with terror. A single industrial light hung from the ceiling above them, swaying slightly. Its dim yellow glow cast long shadows across the empty building. Marcus struggled against the zip ties around his wrists. "You idiots don't understand who you're dealing with," he shouted. "My lawyers will bury every one of you." But his voice cracked halfway through, because deep down, he already knew. The massive steel warehouse doors slowly slid open. The screech of metal echoed like thunder. Footsteps followed. Slow, heavy, confident. Out of the darkness walked Park Hyansuk, not in a wheelchair, not pretending to be weak, but standing tall, powerful, terrifying. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing the dark tattoos of dragons and thorns that wrapped around his muscular forearms. Behind him stood several members of the Park Syndicate, silent and unmoving like shadows. Gloria let out a horrified gasp. "But you're supposed to be paralyzed." Hyansuk finished calmly. His dark eyes settled on Marcus. "You saw what I wanted you to see." Marcus swallowed hard. "This is illegal." He tried again weakly. "You can't kidnap us." Hyansuk stepped forward. His presence filled the entire room like a storm. "You sent men to rob my wife." His voice was dangerously quiet. "You left her bleeding in the street." Derek suddenly burst out. "We didn't hurt her." The next second, one of Hyansuk's men punched Derek in the stomach. Derek collapsed forward in the chair, gasping for air. Hyansuk didn't even look at him. His eyes remained locked on Marcus. "For 1 year," he said slowly, "I listened to her cry about the husband she lost." Marcus's breathing became shaky. "For 1 year," Hyansuk continued, "I watched her live in a house where you treated her like garbage." He leaned down until his face was inches from Marcus, and yet she was still kind to a man she believed was broken. His voice turned cold. "She is worth more than your entire bloodline." Marcus trembled. "What do you want?" Hyansuk straightened. "What do I want?" His expression turned almost amused. "You think this is about money?" He gestured to his men. "You stole from her. You blackmailed her. You sent criminals after her." The warehouse fell silent. Hyansuk's voice echoed across the metal walls. "So tonight, you repay your debt." He turned and walked away toward the exit. Before stepping out, he gave one final order. "Make sure they remember this night." The heavy doors slammed shut. Moments later, the screams began. The courtroom. The next morning, the scene was completely different. Bright sunlight shone through the massive windows of the Seoul Central District Court. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, business elites, socialites. Everyone had come to witness the fall of the Coleman family. Marcus, Gloria, and Derek sat at the defense table. They looked nothing like the powerful billionaires they once were. Marcus's suit was wrinkled. Gloria's makeup had run down her face. Derek stared blankly at the floor. Across the room sat Naira. She wore a tailored cream-colored suit that perfectly complemented her glowing brown skin. Beside her sat Park Hyansuk, calm, silent, powerful. The judge entered the courtroom. "Proceed." Hyansuk's lead attorney stood up. "Your Honor, today we present evidence of one of the most disgraceful financial conspiracies in recent Korean history." The large courtroom screens lit up. Document after document appeared. Daniel Coleman's original will, hidden bank accounts, fraudulent property transfers, secret recordings of Derek bragging about selling Naira into marriage to pay off his gambling debts. The room filled with shocked whispers. But the final blow came next. The penthouse security footage. Video showing Gloria throwing Naira's belongings into the hallway. Marcus threatening to make her homeless if she didn't sign the marriage contract. The courtroom fell silent. Then Naira took the stand. She spoke calmly, without anger, without hatred. "They told me I was worthless because I had no child." Her voice was steady but emotional. "They treated me like I didn't exist." She looked directly at Marcus. "They didn't just steal my home. They tried to erase me." Even the judge looked disturbed. After hours of testimony, the verdict finally came. The judge raised his gavel. The Coleman family is found guilty of fraud, coercion, financial theft, and criminal conspiracy. Marcus closed his eyes. This court orders the immediate seizure of all Coleman assets. Gasps filled the courtroom. Every property, company, and account will be returned to Mrs. Naira Coleman Park. Gloria started crying hysterically, but the judge wasn't finished. Additionally, the defendants are sentenced to 15 years in a high-security prison. The gavel struck. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Marcus collapsed into his chair. Derek began sobbing. Gloria screamed for mercy, but Naira didn't look back. As the bailiffs dragged them away in handcuffs, she simply walked down from the witness stand and straight into Hyen-suk's arms. He pulled her close. "It's over," he whispered. "The house is yours again." She leaned against his chest. For the first time in a year, the weight on her heart finally lifted. 1 year later, the Coleman penthouse looked completely different. The cold gold decorations had been replaced with warm colors. The heavy curtains were gone. Sunlight filled the rooms. Paintings decorated the walls. Music sometimes echoed through the halls. It was no longer a mausoleum. It was a home. And laughter lived there again. 1 year after the trial, the evening sky over Seoul glittered with thousands of city lights. Naira stood on the glass balcony overlooking the Han River. She wore a flowing emerald dress. Her face looked peaceful. In her arms, she held a small bundle wrapped in soft cashmere. A baby boy. Their son. Behind her, the balcony door opened. Hyen-suk stepped outside. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms gently around her waist. The same way he had the morning, he revealed the truth. He looked down at the sleeping child. "He has your eyes." Naira smiled softly. "And your stubbornness." Hyen-suk chuckled quietly. Something that once seemed impossible for the feared crime lord. He gently touched the baby's tiny hand. "This boy will inherit everything. The empire, the power, the future." Naira leaned back against his chest. But more importantly, she kissed their son's forehead. "He will inherit love." Hyen-suk looked out across the glittering city skyline. For most of his life, he had ruled the shadows. Feared, respected, untouchable. But none of it had ever meant anything until he met her. "I built an empire of ice," he murmured. "But you gave it a heart." Naira turned slightly in his arms. "We built it together." Below them, the lights of Seoul shimmered like a sea of stars. Behind them slept a child who represented their future. And in that quiet moment, there were no enemies, no lies, no wheelchairs, no ghosts, only a dragon, his queen, and the kingdom they had forged from the ashes of betrayal. The storm that once punished her had finally passed. And at last, Naira Coleman Park was home.